Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The air around the frozen throne was deathly still, a cold so deep it seemed to freeze time itself. The ice beneath the Lich King's seat groaned as if in protest of the dark power that had dominated this place for so long. Arthas Menethil sat motionless upon the throne, his helmet, the crown of domination, perched on his head like a cruel reminder of what he had become. His eyes, glowing with an unnatural blue, were fixed on the horizon, though they saw nothing. No armies, no enemies, just the frozen wasteland that stretched endlessly before him. But inside his mind, a storm raged. Voices echoed in the darkness of his thoughts, whispers of the past memories he thought he had buried beneath the weight of his power. The boy he once was, the Prince of Lordaeron, was all but gone, replaced by the cold, merciless Lich King. Yet even now, the man he used to be clawed at his mind, desperate to be remembered. I thought a voice familiar and sorrowful broke through the fog in his mind. He knew that voice. He had once heard it with reverence and love. Either the Lightbringer, his mentor, his friend, until he had betrayed him, struck him down in cold blood on his quest for power. Other had died trying to save him, trying to pull him back from the brink of madness, but Arthas had already been lost. You must let go of the power. It has consumed you. Huther's voice was filled with sorrow, but it was no longer the voice of a living man. It came from somewhere beyond, from a place of peace that Arthas could no longer reach. The former paladin spirit lingered, reaching out, still trying to save the boy who had once been his student. But Arthas felt nothing, not remorse, not guilt, only a cold emptiness. He had embraced the darkness, allowed it to take root in his soul. There was no turning back. You read too late, Arthas muttered to the empty air. I am the Lich King now. I have no need for redemption. Yet Uther's voice persisted, a constant reminder of the choices Arthas had made and the man he had once been. Every time his mind drifted into silence, Uther was there, calling him back to the light. But the light was weak. It was a fleeting memory, a distant dream. Suddenly, a ripple of power surged through the frozen throne, jolting Arthas from his reverie. His glowing eyes narrowed as he sensed a disturbance in the air, something dark and familiar approaching. It was not just the dead that walked these lands. Something far more dangerous was coming. Illidan Stormrun, the name struck Arceus like a blade. He could feel the demon hunter Saiya presence even from this great distance. Illidan, the cursed night elf, who had once challenged him and failed. Illidan, whose hatred for Arthas burned hotter than the fires of the burning legion. Arthas rose from the throne, his frost-covered armor clinking with the movement. He reached for Frostmourne, the cursed blade that had consumed his soul long ago, and felt its dark power surge through him. Illidan would come as he always did, seeking vengeance. But this time, the demon hunter was no mere nuisance. This time Illidan sought to end him. Far below the icy peaks of the frozen throne, Illidan's Stormrage marched with purpose. His piercing, burning eyes scanned the horizon, his demonic wings beating against the cold wind. Behind him followed an army, a fearsome force of demon hunters, night elves, and those who had sworn allegiance to Illidan's queue. His long exile had left him with nothing but vengeance in his heart, and now, at last, he would have it. The weight of the twin blades of Asinoth hung at his sides, and the fell fire that burned within him blazed brighter with every step he took toward his enemy. The Lich King had evaded him once before, but not this time. This time, Illidan would strike at the very heart of the frozen throne, and he would not stop until Arthas Menethil was destroyed. As they neared the outer reaches of the Lich King's fortress, Illidan, and mind wandered back to their last encounter. Arthas had been far stronger than he had anticipated. But now, years had passed, and Illidan had grown even more powerful. His hatred for Arthas had festered, turning into a burning need for revenge. That it was more than just personal, Illidan knew that as long as Arthas remained on the throne, the world would be in peril. The Lich King's sun army of undead grew stronger with each passing day, and soon there would be nothing left to stand against them. His generals fell into step beside him, their faces grim with determination. Is this truly the only way, Lord Illidan? Asked one of them. Illidan's eyes blazed with anger. There is no other way. Frey, he snapped. The Lich King must fall. If he remains, there will be no hope for this world. We must strike now before his power grows beyond our reach. The general nodded, though doubt flickered in his eyes. Illidan saw it, but chose to ignore it. There was no room for hesitation. Now the time for questions was over. The only thing that mattered was the destruction of Arthas and the end of the frozen throne. But as the icy winds bit into his skin and the fortress loomed ahead, a small voice whispered in the back of Illidan's mind. Is this truly about saving the world, or is it about your hatred? Illidan growled, shaking off the thought. There was no time for doubt, no time for reflection. He was a weapon forged by his own choices, and he would not hesitate to use his power to bring an end to the Lich King's reign. Within the frozen throne, Arthas could feel Illidan's cell approach like a storm gathering on the horizon. The demon hunter's hatred radiated outward, tainting the air with the promise of bloodshed. Arthas stood at the peak of his icy domain, staring down at the swirling snow below. Illidan would arrive soon, and when he did, there would be a reckoning. But it was not fear that gnawed at Arthas' mind. It was something else, a memory of ghosts that had never quite left him. Arthas. Ethersaf's voice echoed again, but this time it was louder, more insistent. Arthas clenched his gauntleted fist around the hilt of Frostmourne, feeling the blade, so cold hunger for soul. I have nothing to say to you, Arthas growled, his voice cutting through the cold air. But Uther's spirit appeared before him, shimmering like a faint light in the gloom of the throne room. The paladin Sahib, once strong frame, was now ethereal, his armor glowing with the soft light of the afterlife. His eyes, however, were as stern as they had ever been. You have fallen far, my pupil, Uther said, his voice heavy with sadness, but it's not too late there, still a way back. Arthas laughed, though there was no humor in it. A way back to what? To the life I once had, the kingdom I destroyed with my own hands. There is no redemption for me. Sir, I am the Lich King. I have embraced my destiny.
Uther's gaze did not waver. You think this is your destiny. You believe that the frozen throne is where you were always meant to be. Look around you, Arthas.
This is not power. This is a prison. You are a slave to the darkness you sought to control. Arthas' grip on Frostmourne tightened. I am no slave, he hissed. I am the master of the scourge. I control the dead. I command the power of death itself. And yet you are as much a prisoner as the souls trapped in that blade, Uther said softly. You may control the scourge, but who controls you? Is it truly you, Arthas, or is it the frozen throne? For a moment, Arthas hesitated. A flicker of doubt passed through his mind, but it was quickly buried beneath the weight of his power. He could not afford to waver now. Illidan was coming, and soon the final battle would begin. Leave me, Uther, Arthas said, turning away from the spirit. I have no use for your words. My path is set. Uther's spirit lingered for a moment longer, as if searching for some glimmer of hope in his former student. But when he found none, he simply nodded. I only hope that when the time comes, you will make the right choice, Arthas. Not for yourself, but for the world you once swore to protect. And with that, Uther's spirit faded, leaving Arthas alone once more. But his words lingered, hanging in the air like a weight that Arthas could not shake. The right choice. He scoffed at the thought. There were no right choices left for him. There was only power and the will to use it. Below, the battle had begun. Illidan's forces clashed with the undead legions of the Scourge, the sound of metal on metal ringing through the frozen air. The demon hunters, armed with their feel-infused weapons, tore through the ranks of the undead with brutal efficiency, their hatred for the Lich King fueling their every strike. But the Scourge was vast, and for every undead that fell, another rose in its place, drawn by the will of the frozen throne. Illidan himself was at the forefront of the battle, his twin blades cutting through the undead with savage precision. His eyes were locked on the distant peak of the frozen throne where he knew Arthas waited. His heart burned with the need for vengeance, but there was something else there too, something he didn't want to acknowledge. He had once sought to claim the power of the frozen throne for himself. And even now, as he fought to destroy Arthas, a part of him still craved that power. The thought gnawed at him, but he pushed it aside. This was not about power. This was about ending the reign of the Lich King, once and for all. The cold wind whipped around Arthas as he stood atop the frozen throne, watching the battle unfold below. He could feel the pull of the undead, the way they responded to his will, but his mind was elsewhere. Uther's words had stirred something deep within him, something he had long thought dead. But there was no time for reflection. Illidan was coming, and soon they would face each other once more. The right choice, Arthas thought bitterly. There were no choices left for him. But even as he gripped Frostmourne and prepared for the final battle, a small part of him couldn't help but wonder if Uther had been right. Illidan. So its forces surged forward, cutting through the endless ranks of the undead, their ferocity unmatched by the coldness of the scarred. His eyes burned with a single goal, Arthas. The frozen throne was no longer a symbol of power to him, but a festering wound in the world, one that he intended to cauterize with fire and fury. His twain blades of Azinoth cleaved through the unholy legions, each strike fueled by years of anger and bitterness. Yet as he fought, Illidan could feel the weight of his obsession clawing at him. He had told his allies that this was for the world, that the Lich King had to be stopped before his armies consumed everything. But deep down, in the darkest corners of his soul, he knew the truth. This was personal. It had always been personal. His wings unfurled as he leapt into the air, hovering above the battlefield. Below, his forces continued to clash with the Scourge, their resolve unwavering. But no matter how many undead they cut down, the numbers remained unrelenting. The frozen throne, sad power fed them, drawing from the cold, twisted magic that held the Lich King's army together. Illidan scanned the horizon, his demonic eyes locking onto the tower of ice in the distance. Arthas was there, waiting, watching. The memory of their last encounter flashed through his mind, the bitter taste of defeat, the sting of Frostmourne biting into his flesh. He had underestimated ourselves once. He would not make that mistake again. With a growl of determination, Illidan dove toward the throne, his wings propelling him with blinding speed. The wind howled around him, but it was drowned out by the roaring in his ears, the sound of his own heart pounding with anticipation and hatred. This time, it would end. Arthas stood atop the frozen throne, his gaze unwavering as Illidan. The form grew larger in the distance. The demon hunter was coming just as he had always known he would. Arthas tightened his grip on Frostmourne, the blade pulsing with dark energy, eager to taste blood once again. But something was different this time. Uther's words still echoed in his mind, a constant reminder of the man he had once been and the choices he had made. He tried to push the voice away, to drown it in the cold, but it clung to him like a persistent shadow. Arthas had chosen this path. He had embraced the darkness willingly, knowing full well the price he would pay. Yet, now, as Illidan closed the distance, he felt the faint stirrings of doubt. Was this truly what he wanted? Was this the only way? The wind shifted as Illidan landed on the icy platform before him, his wings folding behind him with a snap. The two stood in silence for a moment, the air between them charged with years of hatred and unresolved conflict. Arthas, Illidan growled, his voice laced with venom. Airy sense. Now, Arthas met his gaze, his glowing blue eyes, cold and unfeeling. You think you can stop me, Illidan. You failed once before. What makes you think this time will be any different? Illidan's lips curled into a snarl. Because I've learned from my mistake. And because I am not here for power anymore, I am here to end you. Without another word, Illidan lunged forward, his blade swinging toward Arthas with deadly precision. Frostmourne met them with a resounding clash, the force of the impact sending a shockwave through the icy air. Sparks flew as steel met steel, the sound of their battle echoing through the frozen wasteland. Illidan fought with the fury of a man possessed, his strikes relentless and fueled by years of bitterness. But Arthas was no stranger to combat. He parried each blow with ease, his movements fluid and calculated. Frostmourne sang as it cut through the air, its dark magic pulsing with each strike. The battle raged on, neither man giving an inch. Illidan's eyes burned with hatred, but as the fight continued, something else crept into his mind. Doubt. Arthas was strong, perhaps stronger than he had ever been, but there was something different about him now. A hesitation in his movements. A flicker of uncertainty behind his cold exterior. Is this all you have, demon? Arthas taunted, his voice cold and emotionless. You've grown weaker since we last met. Illidan's eyes narrowed. You were lying, Gato. He spat, though. The words rang hollow, even to him. He could feel it too, the crack in Arthas' armor, the uncertainty in his strikes. The whack. With a growl, Illidan pressed the attack, his strikes growing more frantic, more desperate. He had to end this now before Arthas regained his footing, but no matter how hard he fought, no matter how vicious his attacks, Arthas did not falter. Suddenly, Frostmourne caught one of Illidan's blades, twisting it out of his grip and sending it clattering across the ice. Frostmourne's blade sliced through the air, aiming for Illidan's sedge heart. But at the last moment, Arthas hesitated. The image of Uther's ghostly figure flashed in his mind, his mentor's words echoing through his thoughts once more. This is not power. This is a prison. The hesitation was brief, barely a second, but it was enough. Illidan recovered, twisting away from the strike and launching himself into the air with a furious roar. His remaining blade flashed as he brought it down toward Arthas, intent on delivering the killing blow. But Arthas was ready. Frostmourne met the blade with a resounding clash, and with a surge of dark energy, he flung Illidan backward, sending the demon hunter sprawling across the icy platform. For a moment, the battlefield was silent, the only sound the howling wind that whipped around them. Illidan lay on the ground, gasping for breath, his body battered and bruised. Arthas stood over him, Frostmourne raised high, ready to deliver the final blow. But once again Uther's voice filled his mind. You have a choice. Arthas, you can let go of this darkness. You can choose redemption. Arthas froze, his grip on Frostmourne tightening. Redemption. The word felt foreign to him, distant, as if it belonged to another life, a life that no longer existed. But Uther was right about one thing. He was a prisoner. The frozen throne, the power of the Lich King, it had all consumed him, chained him to a destiny that he had once believed was his own. But now, as he stood on the edge of victory with his greatest enemy at his mercy, he felt no satisfaction, no triumph, only emptiness. Illidan looked up at him, his chest heaving with each labored breath. His eyes burned with hatred, but beneath that, there was something else. Fear. Fear of death, fear of failure, fear that his quest for vengeance had all been for nothing. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Arthas hesitated. The wind howled around them, the icy air biting at their skin, but neither of them moved. The battle had come to a standstill, and in that moment, Arthas made his decision. He lowered Frostmourne. Illidan's eyes widened in shock, his breath catching in his throat. What are you doing? Arthas stared down at the blade in his hands, the dark magic within it, pulsing like a heartbeat. The weight of it, the weight of everything suddenly felt unbearable. I'm ending this, Solar Arthas said quietly, his voice barely audible over the wind. Illidan struggled to his feet, disbelief written across his face. It's you letting me go. Arthas met his gaze, his glowing blue eyes, unreadable. Ray, there's been enough death, enough destruction. For a moment, Illidan was silent, his mind racing to comprehend what was happening. But then slowly he nodded. He had come here to destroy the Lich King, to end the terror that had plagued the world. But perhaps in the end, it was Arthas who had ended it himself. Without another word, Illidan turned and walked away, his wings spreading wide as he took to the skies once more. The battle below raged on, but without their leader. The scourge began to falter, their connection to the frozen throne weakening. Arthas watched as Illidan disappeared into the distance, his mind swirling with thoughts he had long buried. The echoes of Uther's voice had finally quieted, but their impact remained. Arthas knew that the path ahead would not be easy, but for the first time in years he felt something that he had thought was lost to him forever. Hope. The frozen throne stood silent as the battle ended. The ice cracked and splintered beneath Arthas' feet as he turned and walked away, leaving the throne and the power it held behind. And as he disappeared into the icy wasteland, the echoes of the past finally began to fade.